Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Christensen. This is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, a gathering place for fellow fiends the world over to discuss all things freaky and frightening. If you want to be part of the conversation, and I hope you do, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, maybe go back and check out some of our previous episodes, leave a comment, and most importantly, let us know the fright flicks you'd like to discuss in the future. That kind of connection is exactly what we're looking for, and it really does make a difference. We're all about sharing the scare, and we want to hear from you. Following its debut at Sundance in 2018, Hereditary became an instant smash with audiences and critics alike, thanks to its vicious, snarling screenplay, live wire performances, and electrifying production design. Repeat viewings only enhance one's appreciation for writer-director Ari Aster's unsettling tale of family drama and supernatural leanings. Hereditary is a devastating examination of grief and loss, as delicately assembled as the miniature dioramas that Toni Collette's artist character creates, where the click of a character's tongue can send more shivers down the spine than 100 jumped-up jump scares. 1 year later, Aster returned with the sun-drenched folk horror opus Midsommar, in which 4 graduate students follow their Swedish classmate to his remote hometown commune for an elaborate midsummer festival that takes place every 90 years. The immersive celebration, steeped in centuries-old traditions, provides the palette upon which this visual, aural, and emotional feast plays out. And while the acclaim was not entirely universal, the 1-2 punch of Hereditary and Midsommar announced Aster as an artistic force to be reckoned with. In 2023, the young auteur's passion project Beau is Afraid, a script he'd been aching to produce since his days at AFI, finally came to fruition. The result was a sprawling, haunting, bewildering, and baffling combination of butt-clenching anxiety, absurdist comedy, and inversion of the classic hero's journey. It also proved a bit much for critics and fans, who found its rambling tone, metaphor-laden subject matter, and 3-hour running time a tough night at the multiplex. Even so, there was little denying that Aster is and remains a fascinating filmmaker, one whose output defies simple categorization of good or bad, success or failure. Tonight's episode is called We Have to Talk About Ari Aster, and I've assembled another fantastic group of film fans to chat about it with me. So I'm going to bring everybody in, and let's say hello to Owais Ahmed, Mariana Reichman, and Dominic Conti. And we're here to chat about Ari Aster and his 3 feature films to date: Hereditary from 2018, Midsommar from 2019, and Beau is Afraid from 2023. Thanks for coming on the show, everybody, and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Woo! Actually, I have Dominic and Owais to blame and or thank for coercing me into Beau is Afraid, because I'd heard the rumblings about, people's discontent with it. And I was kind of like, I'll get around to it eventually. Dominic had reached out to me about first Skinamarink, which is another troubling horror film. Not necessarily a mass appeal there, but also he was like, I think Beau is Afraid would qualify as a horror film. And I'm like, all right, I'll give it a whirl. And then Owais, you had seen it in the theater. And you're like, have you seen Beau is Afraid? Have you seen Beau is Afraid? Because I feel like anybody who's seen Beau is Afraid immediately needs to talk about Beau is Afraid to somebody. Mariana, you had a similar experience recently as well. So I'm glad we're all here. We're all here to have our encounter group about all things Ari Aster. We'll start off with Hereditary, just because that's most people's entryway, even if it wasn't the first film you happen to see. Owais, do you mind we start off with you? What was your initial impression of Hereditary, and where did you see it for the first time?
A friend showed it to me a couple of years ago. I had no idea what I was getting into, but already loved Toni Collette. You can tell there was a lot of thought put into like the production, and everything kind of had its a vibe, like colors, and there was a bigger theme. And then, the thing happened, and that's where I had such a visceral vocal response, and it was weird. You know what I'm talking about? Are we allowed to say these things?
Hang on. Let's just make it so okay for everybody, because hey, everybody, we're gonna be talking spoilers all episode long. So if you haven't seen any of these films, please stop right now or suffer the consequences.
Great. When her head hits the sign, I lost it. I was like, what the? But then I started laughing. That's how I deal with trauma, I guess.
It was just so outrageous.
Yeah. But there's like a clear point of view where I was like, oh, this guy has mommy issues. You can tell when an artist, like the dialogue of like Toni Collette talking about her mom and how she was such a traumatic force in her life. But then we see her be that to her kids. But of course, she has no clue that she's being that.
Right.
Until like all these traumatic events started to happen. And this thing, as somebody who comes from an anxious household, I felt like very seen. Where I was like, hey, this is all of you are the same. And it's just, you're repeating this thing. And I was like, oh, hereditary. It's hereditary.
Yeah, it's hereditary. Get it? Dominic, can I bounce down to you? How about you? What was your first experience with Hereditary?
Well, I came into it hearing a number of my horror fan friends just sing its praises all day long. And at that point, I had already seen Midsommar.
Okay.
And loved it. And matter of fact, I probably saw Midsommar. Is it Midsommar? That's how you say it, right?
Well, we're going to say Midsommar because he put the damn A in there, so we might as well use it.
I'd seen that a couple times, and I came into Hereditary thinking, I think I thought it was going to be more of a straight up some ghosties and demons in there type movie. And it really was much more psychological and devastating that way. I didn't expect the writing and the acting to be quite that exemplary. Maybe I should have. I mean, because I really liked everybody in Midsommar, but it was really, really something. Toni Collette probably dodged an Oscar, but I don't know why. I mean, maybe it's because some prejudice against horror movies in that realm. But I mean, she could have gotten one. I wouldn't see why not. Yeah. And I just really like this film, and I thought of it as a brother-sister combo because I'm very into I study and read up about cults, and I really connected it as a sort of brother-sister film to Midsommar cult-wise.
Oh yeah.
He becomes the king at the end. There's a May Queen at the end of Midsommar, and when we get to Beau is Afraid, I'll talk your ears off more about how I think that's a cult film.
Mariana, what about you? Because I mean, I remember you being very enthusiastic about Hereditary, and that's how you ended up on this panel. I was like, well, get on in here. This will be fun.
I first saw it actually this summer. I think it was like June, maybe. I have always been hesitant with horror movies, just because like the stereotypical like monsters under your bed, check the closets before you go to bed at night, that kind of thing. And I've always, ever since I was a little kid, have had a very active imagination. And I used to like make my parents allow the hall light to be on at night while I slept in the hallway and just have like bright light coming into my room because I was terrified of the dark. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to, I watched it with someone. I, to be honest, I don't think I would have watched it on my own. Like Owais said, like my initial reaction to her, like she couldn't breathe. Her head was hanging out the window. He was trying to avoid the deer in the road or whatever that was. And she couldn't react because she was reacting to something already. And her head got blown off. And I was just like, are we allowed to curse on this?
Have at it.
I was just like, what the fuck was that? And I looked at my friend, I was like, what the fuck was that?
I was like,
I was like, think I was like, oh, like that. Oh, sorry, I shook the whole table. I wasn't expecting the acting to be so like in depth and not for the lack of like quality, but like it was very well acted. It was very well written, as like there is that central theme of loss and grief and love in all of those movies and what that looks like. And that's like that central theme. So my initial reaction was very well written. The quote unquote scary parts weren't like scary, if that makes it. Like I tell people it's jarring and it's psychologically a bit draining, but I wasn't like scared.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I found it just incredibly intense.
Yeah.
I mean, and I was definitely like, I was hanging on to the armrests when I was watching in the theater because I had heard it was a really good movie. and I just happened to have a free afternoon. I went down and saw it at the old AMC, and I was not prepared for it to be as intense as it was.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it's another one that clocks in over 2 hours, which is not usually a good, like horror films, usually you want it in and out and done in like, under 2 hours. But there's never a moment where I felt my butt getting sore. I was like, this is great. It's really well paced.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I mean, obviously the big moment is the one with the telephone pole, but when you watch it a second time, it has the symbol on it when they're driving to the party. And you're like,
savage.
Right. And I made a note of that too. And I was just like, the symbol on her necklace, in the casket, the symbol that she originally sees on her mom's stuff in the boxes, and then starts to piece that together. And then I was like asking myself all these questions. I was like, wait, was he in on it? The creepy guy at the funeral, like smiling at Charlie, where he's just like everything started to make more sense when I watched it the second time.
It really dodges. There are horror tropes, which are kind of great. And then there's some horror cliches done when I think horror films aren't so good. It dodges all of those, any of the cliches. The screenplay really holds up. I mean, the dialogue's fantastic. Characters don't do things for no reason. The relationships are super strong.
Well, it feels like it's very much a family drama that just happens to have some supernatural elements incorporated. We talked about Toni Collette's performance, which is just astonishing. Like, she goes through so many ranges of emotion, but I think that's true across the board. I think that everybody, Alex Wolff is terrific as Peter the son, Millie Shapiro as Charlie, the young daughter.
Oh yeah.
And Gabriel Byrne. And I think it's interesting that Gabriel Byrne and Toni Collette are both serving as executive producers on this debut feature from, this new filmmaker. So they must have really read that script and been like, yep, this is the one.
And another thing, it dodges, like the overuse of computer-generated effects.
Right.
The ones that are used are just really, it's used in a very, simple way.
There's a preoccupation with heads. We've got our pigeon at the beginning, which is kind of foreshadowing Charlie. And we've got, mom. It's like there's so much going on with the old noggin.
With the heads and then the crown, because the crown goes on the head. Yep. So it's like,
And I think the mythology, I was just going to say, always like the mythology of how everything kind of pans out, I think is really well thought out. Like the screenplay itself is really sharp.
Like you were saying, Mariana, there was so many like little Easter eggs foreshadowing a lot of things. The ending, how did the ending make you all feel?
The ending, I think, is either love it or hate it.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear how it landed for Mariana. How about you?
I felt like the ending was a little rushed, just because there was all that build up to then everyone in the treehouse. I was just like wasn't fully satisfied. So it's like, okay, so now they found a proper space for Charlie in her brother's body.
Damon is the god, and he's the one they've been trying to invite in, but they invited him into her brother. The mom invited into her brother, who is also named Charlie. Yeah. But then he kills himself, and that's why
a female person can't actively, effectively be. Pyman can't actualize himself in a female body.
Right, and they were separated. I mean, and at that point, like Toni Collette and her mom were separated, and so the grandmother couldn't get to Peter, but she could get to Charlie, and so she invited the spirit of Paimon into Charlie, which meant we have to kill off Charlie at some point and get the spirit into Peter. I don't know why it needed to go through Toni Collette as well, but it did.
Well, that clarifies things. Did they ever explain like how, I mean, I know that Lee was, Annie's mom was like really into that and was like the queen of all that group, but like, is that a dumb question? Like, did they explain like how all these people got into this to begin with?
But how does any cult come together? Like
True. Convincing. Yeah.
Would you join the cult?
No. Maybe if I was the sales advisor for it.
I mean, they got this pretty well thought
Maybe if
out.
I was selling it, I could probably sell some cult memberships.
Yeah. Those people were serious about their beliefs, boy. Yeah.
And they made it work.
Yeah, cults are fascinating to me. I can't say too much on them. I don't know anyone who is ever part of one. I should watch more documentaries about cults just to get in more of an understanding of like people that get into them, people that escape them, people that are born into them that don't have a choice.
I just want to talk really quick about the miniatures, right? And we have all of her, like she's an artist who creates these miniatures of her life. And she goes so far as to kind of create miniatures of her daughter's death, you know, which is an extreme way of coping. But we see this is a family that lies to each other constantly. That was something I noticed on this most recent viewing. Toni Collette says she's going to the movies, but she's actually going to the encounter group. Gabriel Byrne doesn't tell her about the desecration of her mother's grave. The son, Peter, says, you know, I'm not going to drink, but of course we know he's planning to get high. You know, there's all these lies that just kind of this family is just filled with deception, which I like to also frame as illusion, which is what art is all about. You know, it's like it's showing this representation of how we see it.
And that it's also created.
Such a cool character detail. And that was like a good way to show what's going on underneath her, like psychologically at a subconscious level.
And I guess they built every single one of those sets in the house. None of that was actual. It's all built.
Right.
So
right.
really,
The whole house is a set.
Yeah. Oh, where they actually shot it, you mean?
Yeah. Like when you're going through the house, like that's not an actual house. That's all a set. And I love that opening shot where you're tracking in on the dollhouse and then it suddenly becomes Peter's room and he's coming in to wake him up to go to the funeral. It kind of tells us that there's an artifice going on and just to ask, it's an artist asking for us to go for the ride, I think.
The breadcrumbs throughout are chunky enough, but once, especially on a second viewing, I was like, oh, I see now. But I mean, like, really, the big reveal, a good reveal at the end is like, yeah, this was all a plan and designed by this group of people, by this, for lack of a better term, cult. But from the start, Midsommar, it's cult. You know this is going to be bad. And so, you know, now that the neck is in a vice, and how's it going to be squeezed? You know, the antagonist is that whole group. You know? Yeah,
right. Everybody's in it.
Yeah, everybody's in it, and everybody's working against their visitors.
So, Dominic, you saw Midsommar first.
Yeah.
Did anybody see it in the theater?
I did.
What were your thoughts, Owais?
First reaction was like, whoa, I had no expectations. And I thought the opening was so strong. So before we even get there, it's what's going on with Florence Pugh's character is so like traumatizing and common thread line. He deals with trauma and grief. Then I loved how we were watching a horror movie and shit is going awry, but like, you know, horror movies usually at night. Everything's dark and shadowy. This was like in broad daylight, which was creepy. As a brown person, I always notice when brown people in horror movies get killed off, and they killed off all the brown people.
Yep.
So that would have been, if I was his friend, I would have been like, maybe don't kill. Maybe the first guy you don't kill is a black guy.
Well, Midsommar, I think it's also interesting that like he casts like 3 English actors to play Americans. You know, Florence Pugh, Jack Rayner, and Will Poulter.
It's interesting you say that, Owais, about the brightness of it. It has that end of Seven quality, the movie Seven, when it's like it's been days and days of rain, and then they come out of the rain, and the worst stuff happens in the bright sunlight. You know, and it's the creepiest. It's very jarring to watch all these people walk around and they're high on mushrooms in Midsommar, and it's bright out, and no one knows what's real, and it's like this is all by design, and they're just like, here's the cult waiting to put their horribleness into you.
Usually, when you see psychedelics in movies too, it's like so bizarre and overblown. I was watching it, I was like, oh, this is actually what.
That's what I thought.
Feel like.
Yeah,
and like flowers opening it up and out. I was like, that was really cool.
And the tree branches like oddly like intersecting weirdly with each other. Yeah, I think out of the 3, it's my favorite. Honestly, beautiful blue skies. Like you typically attribute that to like just a carefree, wonderful day. Like we all love wonderful weather. And now it's like being attributed to like death and sacrifice and all these things. So yeah, Yeah, a lot of connections with spiritualism, obviously, and with Midsommar and Hereditary. Thought it was the perfect length.
Have any of you seen The Wicker Man, the British horror
I
film?
heard a podcast make fun of it.
There's the Neil LaBute one with Nicolas Cage,
Right,
which is
right.
the one that gets made fun of. But there's a 1973 film directed by Robin Hardy. If you're familiar with it, as I was watching Midsommar, you're kind of like, oh, this is a film that's very much in conversation with The Wicker Man, because they're both about cults. They're both about people who get invited in. They're both about sacrifice. They're both about May Queen, that ceremony. So I was kind of like watching this going, he's deliberately making choices so that it's not just a retread of The Wicker Man. But in so doing, I found that he was kind of like taking horror elements out. Like none of these characters really try to get away.
Right.
We see, Simon and Connie kind of just disappear. We see Mark kind of disappear. So it isn't like this sense of them like realizing they're in danger and trying to get away,
right?
Which is a very common horror trope. Like they recognize, oh shoot, we're in the hands of the baddies. We got to get out of here.
Yeah.
That never happens. And on the one hand, I found that refreshing. On the other hand, I was kind of like, well, you need to have some kind of tension there, because we just spend so much time kind of like watching these characters slowly, inexorably led to their doom. And in Danny's case, like Danny's just kind of an emotional punching bag, and we just see her kind of just passively move through the story, even though she's our protagonist. It's like we're watching her, going through a very serious arc of grief and eventually, healing. Which is bizarre how it ends with her feeling healed while, she lost her family. She now has gained a family.
Interesting. And also, I mean, like, she lost a family, and really that partner, quote unquote partner she has, would love nothing more than to lose her.
Yeah,
but,
right.
And so that's happening too. She feels that, he wants to go away. And so she doesn't want to lose this last connection she has to really maybe anyone, that's of any realness and seriousness at all.
Yeah, you get the sense that she's a very isolated person, that she doesn't have a lot of people in her life.
Perfect for cults. You want to isolate people and then bring them on in.
No, that's actually, I mean, what Mariana talked about earlier, like how do people get drawn into cults? I think it's the lost, and it's the broken, and it's the people who want a connection and don't have a connection.
Connie and Simon, I think they realized that things were starting to go south when Connie and Simon, disappeared. Obviously, Connie was like, he would never leave without me. But I think, to your point, with no one trying to flee, I think there was a place that Pele invited them to, his family's cultural traditions. And typically when we get invited to someone else's cultural traditions, we are respectful because we don't necessarily have anything to base it off of. So why, again, why would they think that something was wrong? This is their culture. We don't understand why people would want to kill themselves at 72. But for them, they're giving themselves to the earth. New life is being brought into the earth. And that was something that really set Simon off. And what I was getting to was, I think that Connie, Simon, Josh, and Mark were all just like eliminated, for lack of a better word, was because of their selfishness. I feel like they were all selfish in different ways and not willing to be respectful. And I think that community was like, we don't have time for this. Pele, you brought us this girl who is clearly in pain, that you see something in, that you think could be a part of our community. We're going to continue to use Christian, who clearly doesn't have concern about anyone but himself. And we'll eventually get rid of him too. So that's like kind of how I thought about it at the end. I was like, their main focus was getting Danny to see how, well, I think that they felt like that she was wonderful and that she, because she goes through life, with her relationship with her Christian, like with the phone call with her friend. Am I being too needy? Am I being that? as a woman, it's the only woman in this group. I have had relationships younger. I have learned since that I would call girlfriends and be like, oh my God, I think I'm overthinking this, but I think I'm being too needy for it. Like, I think I'm asking him too much. And same advice was given. Well, then he's not good enough for you. But she doesn't have anyone else,
Nope.
and
it was so hard to hear that when she was like, am I being needy? Yeah.
I was like, felt her pain, like when Christian went over after she found out that her sister had killed herself and her parents.
Yeah.
Like with the screaming and the screaming was big in all three of those movies. Like that depth, guttural screaming.
That scene where there's that's one of my favorite scenes is Florence Pugh is just it reminded me of theater school, like a movement exploration, but when she's like crying and grieving and the women around her are like also
wailing
they're
in unison.
Exactly. Yeah, they're feeling it.
It was so healing for her.
Mm-hmm.
It was also such a unique scene, and I loved seeing her actually be in those moments and find catharsis.
Yeah.
Like even at the end when like he's in the bear and getting burned up, and she's just sitting there and she's smiling. Like, I felt happy for her.
Right. I know, I did too.
I feel like the scariest stuff for me in Hereditary and Midsommar both were the acceptance of the people at the end who the cult wanted, and that when the people accepted that, yeah, I am going to go into the cult. So watching Florence cry tears of joy there made me feel that was the worst moment. I mean, the best in a way too, because then the movie had me, but it was also the worst because I'm like, this is the nadir. This is the worst. This is awful. And the same when they're chanting at the end of Hereditary, and it's now they've got their new king. Simon's gonna jump in there, and then that is that. And I gotta feel like Florence Pugh's character is going to join the other women on the wall. She's not going to really live with them. I think they're going to take her out too.
You think so?
I don't think she's going to live amongst them. I think part of her journey is that she then dies and becomes a person on the wall.
Because this movie is so steeped in ritual, and that's one of the things I absolutely love about it. I mean, the meticulous attention to the production design, the costumes, the way they built that. I mean, they basically just built all of those housing structures in that valley. Like there was nothing there, and they built all of that.
It looks awesome. Yeah, it's amazing.
And it looks and feels so authentic, and all of the Harga rituals feel very real. How much of the story that is told to Christian and Josh, how much of that do we think is real? Do we think that's all true because they know they're never going to leave, so why not tell them the truth? Or are they telling them what they need to hear? Like I was thinking about this, like the whole, do they actually all die at 72? Or is that just the story that's told?
That's great. I mean, yeah, why wouldn't you lie? Yeah, I just hadn't thought about that group of people as I thought we're gonna deal with all these Americans and Brits, yes, and they're all gonna serve their purpose in one way or the other, and we might as well tell them. It's the impression I got is they were telling the truth,
right.
But
now,
I mean, I'm sure I'll watch it again. I'll watch and see if are these guys lying?
The reason I asked that is because they do need to bring in new blood. Because of the problem with the inbreeding. And so that's where I thought, yes, Florence Pugh is going to be invited. She will stay because they need to have somebody new from the outside.
Yeah. I wonder, will she then be used for her purpose then and then?
Yeah, maybe.
She's not really one of them. It's kind of what I feel like. The May Queen steps in and is ceremonial. You know what I mean? Well, that's kind of what I thought. I thought she wasn't really going to necessarily be safe after that, but yeah, the new bloodstream makes sense.
Maybe. I mean, and she definitely feels, as Pele says, she's never felt held before. Yeah. So who knows?
So then Christian is also new. The new bloodstream.
Exactly. He's helping spread the good genes around.
Well, I think some of their traditions of the stories and the drawings, especially of attracting a mate, with cooking that cooking that in the meat pie, that was on one of the pictures that they saw when they first came in.
Oh, I mean the pictures tell the story of how they do it, how they,
Mm-hmm.
bring in here comes the May Queen. This is how this ends up here. And then we have a guy, he serves as a quote unquote stud,
Yep.
for
Literally. Yeah.
yeah.
I love that sex scene. It was so weird.
Yeah.
So weird.
It was so weird, and like, but it was also, how do I say this? In a non-sexual way. I also was like, oh, this is kind of beautiful. This is like a matriarch of different personalities, and they're supporting her. But then it's so weird. They're all like going, I think the day I saw it with a couple of friends, and throughout the night, I just randomly kept going, and they were like, huh? Oh, ew.
Well, and I love how Jack Rayner, who plays Christian, I love his expressions throughout that whole scene, where he's kind of like,
So
I
confused.
can't quite get into this because you're all just, watching me.
He's tripping. He's still like, he's on
he's
drugs.
still tripping.
His pupils are dilated.
He wouldn't have done that sober. They had to lie to him.
Yeah.
No, I feel like he would have done that sober. He was like, he was creepy on that kid.
He was very arrogant.
Could have snuck off, I think, Owais. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I don't think he was down for the ceremonial.
I don't think so.
Things. Yeah. It's interesting because Ari Aster, I think, the impression I get, I've seen interviews with him, he seems like a kind person. And in a lot of ways, people he could demonize. I mean, like, Christian's a bit of a callow piece of shit in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
But in other ways, he's just a person who is stuck with someone else and he shouldn't be, or he just wants to find his research project. I mean, he's really like a very imperfect person who's also like not evil. And they lay out even like Pele, and who is like the the point person for that cult. They're like and grew up in the cult and probably doesn't know anything else other than this system. Maybe under a different aegis, he'd be a real human being.
I mean, I think this is one of the issues I have with Midsommar, though, is I feel like each one of the characters that are brought in, well, actually all the characters, I feel like they're all kind of one note. Florence Pugh plays a great symphony of grief, but it's grief. And Christian is the callow, can't make up his mind. He's a coward. Doesn't want to be the bad guy. Josh is the intellect. Mark is the ugly American, just vaping and checking out how hot all the Swedish chicks are. Each one of those just gets hammered home over and over and over again. So that was one thing I was like, I would have loved to see just a little bit more shading in those characters. We see that diversity of characterizations throughout Hereditary. Like we see Gabriel Byrne like struggling with his role in the family. We see, Alex Wolff struggling. We see Toni Collette struggling. It doesn't feel like it's just one kind of monolith, which is one thing I do feel the characters of Midsommar are a little just what they are from beginning to end.
Like a good point. Yeah, they're just sort of like they serve a purpose.
I remember watching it, the director's cut, thinking like it was a little 30 minutes too long, but it's still a lovely movie. As an art form aside, as a piece of entertainment, it's so surprising. All of his movies, like you're taking on a ride.
Midsommar is an interesting example of like he's not even shooting like a movie that's like, there's no typical antagonist. There's no one person antagonist. You kind of know what's going to happen as soon as it starts and you stay with it. That's quite an accomplishment right there.
Yeah. I did want to ask, there was a woman screaming, and in 3 separate scenes, Mark looked up to see what it was.
Yeah.
What was that, Connie?
That's Connie. And we see it from 3 different vantage points, and nobody does anything.
Right. Nobody does anything because everything that's already happening there is just so odd to them that they don't question it.
I think you brought it up, Mariana, like the idea of like being in a strange culture and you're trying to just accept things as being different, not wrong.
Yeah, and being respectful. Yeah.
But the second you see 2 people throw themselves off a cliff, you're kind of like, now, hang on a second. I'm not sure.
That's when it's interesting. That's when the British couple's like, we're gone,
Yeah, that's when they were like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
They died.
The woman, she tried to give an explanation that it was giving life as a gesture and recycling.
Right. And I think it's a compelling case. I mean, like, that makes sense on an intellectual level.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the cult seems to play on the idea of like no one wants to be the ugly American and say, your culture is wrong. So they use that to their advantage to keep them. The two guys, I mean, imagine if you were a scholarly type and you had that, to use for your thesis. It'd be an amazing world building coup to get that. So that keeps them there. How much and how often the drugging is going on and carrying on. Maybe they're never really quite in their right selves, because that's a very cult thing to do. Just keep everyone drugged.
Because one of the things I noticed, I did watch the director's cut this time around, and the scenes that got excised, for length, are, I feel like, the weakest of the scenes. And it's a case where I feel like the editor actually did the audience a service by trimming it down. As I watched, I was like, because there's more scenes of kind of Danny and Christian bickering, and there's
talking about the paper.
Yeah, right. And there's one kind of cool ritual among the Harga that we do lose, and it kind of informs what happens with Connie. That whole scene where there's the kid that's going to be tossed into the water, and they say, you're brave, you don't have to do that. And it turns out they end up, drowning Connie instead. The theatrical version of Midsommar, I think, is a stronger film. And if you're looking for more, which is what I think director's cuts should be, they should be for people who really love that movie and, hey, I want more, here's some more for you.
Yep.
But in terms of just like a straight storytelling, I think the theatrical version is the stronger of the two.
Agreed.
Always Afraid needed a theatrical version.
Well, yes, and that's where we're going right now.
Can I ask one more question?
Oh, please.
I wrote, what the fuck happened to Mark? Like when he came up behind Josh in that
Well, that's not Mark.
What did they do to him? What was that?
They cut his face off, and that's being worn on the face of somebody else. I think it's our inbred oracle.
I was so like, what happened?
Yeah. They sliced his face off, and they're wearing it like a mask. See, it's a horror film.
Yeah, it is
another crew really, really believing in what they're doing. Yeah, they got a lot. That's a lot of conviction to carve someone's face off. I was gonna say,
and they have really good skill at. I mean, like it does look like like if I was going to carve somebody's face off, I wouldn't do nearly that good of a job. So, well done, everybody.
There'd be a mistake, sure.
Actually, I do want to really quick before we jump into Beau is Afraid, because Simon's fate is also pretty horrific when they discover Simon hanging in that barn area. Yeah. He's got the flowers inside. He has lungs pulled out through his back.
I was wondering about that. I was like, is his back open like wings? Like,
yeah. But anyway, yes, let's move on to Beau is Afraid. And wow, the first time I watched that movie, I confess I didn't make it all the way through because I fell asleep. It is one of those movies that I like Midsommar, like Hereditary. There is so much attention to detail. There's such an incredible amount of world building. There's such an investment of all the characters. And so I really, really wanted to like it. And I love that movie for like the first hour and 20 minutes. I think it's astonishing. Owais, go ahead and dive in. Like, what was, because I remember you were like, have you seen Beau's Afraid yet? Have you seen it?
I saw it in theaters. I saw it at Alamo Drafthouse, and the sound system is amazing there. So I really felt the production of sound being used in a way to kind of like we're with Beau from the beginning. Like we witness a birth. Like we start the movie before he's even born, and you hear sounds.
Yeah,
and then he's born, and then as we follow him, everything is so distant until it's like right in your face. And it's like, you really feel like you're seeing this guy, you're living the world through his anxiety and how he perceives the outside world, how his nervous system perceives the outside world. And I agree with you. I was like, that was a great movie. It was way too long. And I've got really anxious in the theater because I was like, all right, I didn't eat enough edibles for this. What the fuck is this going? And then I walked away from it being like, I was so mad at that movie, but I can't stop thinking about it. And I kept thinking about it and thinking about it. And I had a teacher in college once tell me that, you know, good theater, good art is when not if you like it or not, it makes you keep having conversations, which is a little douchey, but
there's definitely something to something that sticks around. I've seen the movie twice, and the second time through, I may have even liked it more. The first time around, my friend and I, we ended up watching it in 3 1-hour chunks, and that wasn't a bad way to watch it. It's kind of,
that
you
is
could
the
almost
best
break
way to
it
watch
down
it, I
to
think.
three sections. You know, there's
Yeah.
the nerve making section, then there's the craziness in the forest, and then there's the
funeral and everything after.
Funeral and horrific sex scene and penis monster, and then
oh my god, yeah.
You know, that old trope.
That's his dad, right?
Yeah.
And the guy in the corner was his brother?
That's his brother.
Oh, they gets locked upstairs. That's right.
Got locked up
yeah.
and never got talked about again because he didn't follow the rules.
Yeah, I'll say too. And when I was saying, you know, I think, and I was putting a little light pressure on you, AC, to do this. I really always felt that this was a horror movie. You know, I mean, like, you got a penis monster, but just for a second or three. We have a little bit of a couple wolves, I think, in the animated section. But I mean, really, though, it's just but psychologically heavy, harsh.
But also funny.
Yeah, it was funnier the second time around. The first hour of it, watching it with my friend, it was just like a lot of dreams I've had when I want to just go somewhere and I can't pack. I don't know how to put a shirt on. I mean, that's really what that looked like. I didn't find that funny at all, you know. But the second go around, I could laugh a little. I think I had a little.
Do you remember the movie Mother?
Yes.
Darren Aronofsky. It reminded, watching it the second time around, it reminded me of Mother because, like, we were introduced to circumstances that kept raising the stakes. Like when we first meet him, and then, you know, basically it's like the world is out to get him. Yeah. And people are going in his apartment, and it's like, what else could go wrong? Oh, there's a guy on the ceiling above his bathtub who's like about to fall.
My god!
Yeah, the guy who falls on him with something. That
well,
yeah,
and
Mother is like, yeah, and the whole world happens within that house. It's kind of a cool movie. It's not perfect, but it's kind of something every.
But it just kept getting, like, it was unexpected. We were met with a lot of unexpected circumstances where it's just like, where is this headed?
A crowd of people eats a baby. I mean, you know, they went as far as you could go.
I just want to bounce Mariana really quick. Get your feelings on Beau's Afraid. Your just kind of like your initial take.
I was immediately anxious and wrote down that immediate thought was anxiety stems from his mother, and everything wrong with the world is because his mother told him, obviously. I wrote, I'm already anxious at 9 minutes and 24 seconds. I was like, where does this person live? Why does he live there if his mother's so concerned about him? His phone conversation with her, I was like, are they Jewish? Because, like, this is a conversation I've had with my mother, and we're Jewish, and these are like semi-regular conversations. Like a perfectly like nice conversation can turn into, how's it going? Are you investing? And then it turns into a whole thing. And it's like, he just wanted to talk to his mom and explain what happened, but somehow this is his fault. Right. Like, I also kind of, like, a part of me wanted to be like, just go out there and knock on your neighbor's door and tell them that you're not playing music. But if I were him, I'd be like, well, if I do that, then I'm going to get stabbed. Or
and which neighbor is it too? Because he goes out to an empty hallway.
Yeah, and then the maintenance guy is like, "Oh yeah, you're fucked." And his keys get stolen, his luggage gets stolen, and then
when we got to the forest, I relaxed a little. I mean, he
had
a hard time in the forest, but I was like, "Oh, he's living a life here."
I was finally relaxed, yes, because that psycho family that hit him.
Oh my God.
And the dead body is still in the street from the other day. And I'm like, are there not police? Like, where does this person live? I was really concerned about where
New York.
Don't forget that
like, where in New York, though? It's not like Brooklyn. I don't know where that is.
It's owned by his mom.
Right.
I know, which you found out later on in the house. And you're like, how could you let your son live there? Did she force him to live there? I had so many questions.
That's how.
Yeah, that's why. And I think that's the interesting thing is that she she resents him for it, but she's the one who has him in that situation.
Mhm.
You know, she could put him in a better place, but she doesn't want to. You know,
She doesn't
putting
want
him in a
him
better
to grow.
Exactly.
She wants to keep him under her thumb, and because she knows she can control him. He's a grown-ass man, though, which is troubling.
I would love to talk about Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised I don't feel like he'll be nominated for anything, but I feel he did a wonderful job. Watching it the second time around, his like, it's really hard to keep your eyes off of him, and he's so tragic, but it's also so funny. He's doing like beautiful physical comedy within this tragedy. And if you look at his like body language, it's like he's like this the whole time, which reminds me of like a kid, and kind of plays into like the bigger story. It is like this guy is a man. Is he like I at times forgot he's a kid because he's just so childlike, and he just wants his mom's approval, but at the same time he hates his mom.
Right.
The mommy please moment on the boat at the end was even more wrenching for me the second go around, because I was like, oh my God, that's right. It's like a lot of what you were just saying, Owais. He's never been actualized. He's never really grown up. He hasn't been allowed to do so, and he hasn't like broken free. If there is even a way to break free, I hadn't noticed it, but one of the logos at the beginning of the film is MW. Isn't her last name Mona
Wasserman.
That's why I thought they were Jewish.
So there's an MW at the beginning of the film, meaning like this whole world is run by Mona. Everything has been constructed. And that's why even the second time around, I thought to myself, did that young girl, maybe that wasn't even paint. That's supposed to send him on the run. You know, maybe she just pretends to drink something. That could have been a gear thrown in the works of Mona's that she then like reacted to get Joaquin's character back on track, Beau. Or it could have been like just another manufactured moment to get Beau to do the next thing she wants him to do.
Oh, wow. I didn't pick up on that detail.
I didn't either.
The machinations are they're there if you want them to be, because she's basically she's gathering evidence for the trial at the end. And it's interesting that the first thing that the psychiatrist writes on his pad is guilty. Like this is a preordained verdict. Like he's guilty from the get-go. This movie is so dense with so many layers and meanings and Easter eggs and things like that, that I think, yes, it all pays off when you watch it. But I feel like, and this is what I said when I first watched the movie, it feels like Ari Aster is worried he's never going to make another movie in his life. It feels like he has to get every single idea he's ever had into this one movie. And that's why I think it wears out its audience goodwill. You start to feel that 3-hour runtime.
By the time we get to the boat, it's already been quite a death march. That's another 20 minutes where he's arguing his case, and that's going as poorly as you'd imagine. And I don't know, there were some moments of levity there. His lawyer is like a little guy screaming off in the corner, and then who
then gets pushed off like Midsommar style.
I wonder too, like, you know, even by the end there, it almost was like Mona was controlling reality. Where did the glue come from? You know what I mean? Like, you know, like how could he really like kill a woman with his own seed or semen? You know what I mean? Like, you know, a lot of the just the
that was weird.
The entire world, you know, the filmmaking world was all Mona. And
well, what's interesting is like I had this, I wrote down that like she basically, Elaine turns into a statue. Parker Posey's character, she turns into a statue. Like she just kind of like freezes. And like when she falls off the bed, she stays in that rigor mortis position, like for the rest of the movie. Well, I mean, Mona's told Beau that if he ever ejaculates, he'll die. You know, and instead, you know, he does ejaculate. And although Joaquin Phoenix's prosthetic, you know, cock and balls were just so funny. Like
very funny. The car hit him for the first time. His balls are
in that first scene when he was.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not belaboring, but I mean, maybe this is the ultimate cult leader and cult, a mother and her son. And so that's, I think, to wrap up without kind of go too hard.
Yes.
But do you know what I mean? Like, you know, like, yeah, this like, here's families, it can be cultish, and this is one, and she only really wanted the one cult member, which is Beau.
Right. She does build a cult around her, but it's so that we can bring this one home.
Yep.
There's a lot of language that was very similar to Hereditary in this too. The role of the mother, and it really makes me feel like, as someone who has mommy issues, I was like, yeah, you also have mommy issues, and I think it's really cool to see an artist working that out. Like there are many, like Patti LuPone's monologues or scenes with Joaquin where she's laying into him reminded me a lot of fighting with my mom when I was a kid.
Oh, no kidding.
And it's like this weird place where you want your mom's approval, but then I was my mom's oldest, and her first, so she very controlled everything I did. By the time like my brother, my youngest brother, came around, he had so much freedom. But like my mom even admits later on, like, yeah, because you're my first, I was worried about the world. I didn't let anybody touch you because I was afraid of germs. So there came a point where I was just like, I hated being controlled. I hated being like, even though she wanted the best for me, her way about doing that. And I think they get in. I think that reminded me a lot of like Beau's relationship was like, he's so sheltered because she's teaching him that the outside world is dangerous. And I'm the only one who can protect you. I'm the only one who loves you. I'm the only one who will tell you what you need to hear when you have low confidence. And so like, how dare you seek approval from other women? So how dare you tell me?
Casting move. What, Patti LuPone, that works.
Oh my God.
Yeah. She nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
I really loved all the performances. I can't think of anyone, even in a small role, who wasn't just excellent.
Well, Amy Ryan and Nathan Lane as the loving couple, like they are just hilarious. Again, I love all the way through the urban nightmare. I love all the way through the Nathan Lane, Amy Ryan, and then like up to the paint drinking when he escapes into the forest, and it kind of becomes another movie for a while. And what's interesting is, and I read this, so this wasn't my original thought, but like this is basically an inversion of the hero's journey, the Joseph Campbell classic. But then we see a hero's journey within, like at the play is basically a hero's journey. It's like I have to go off and I have to explore. And he tells that whole story of like him searching for his family. And then he finally comes back home and it circles back around and he turns to the guy in the audience who may or may not be his dad. And you're like, what, and then we kind of go on with the movie again. And that's where I go, Ari, like, I see what you did there. And that was this lovely kind of moment within your movie. It feels a little indulgent. It feels a little like, look how clever I am. That's not to say it isn't interesting and fascinating. And I don't dislike him for putting it in there. I just kind of like dislike the fact that it took 3 hours to tell that story.
Yes. It lacked urgency. The theater thing was beautiful, but I was like, what is going on here? Yeah. This is just like, and I feel like everything could be, you can categorize everything as self-indulgent, because that's what art is. It's like, watch me while I give you this thing. But what did you think that the point of the theater was?
What we got to see him do, and even though in that midsection in the theater within the movie, he lived an actual, and a lot of it was harrowing and very difficult, but he made choices as that, if you think of that Beau in that life, he made choices. He let it seemed like he let other people affect him. Real events seemed to occur that there was no Mona anywhere. Whether or not she actually, had anything to say about that, about all those things that were going on, very likely, yes. But like, at least for that chunk too, and you get to breathe with him and do and go on that journey with him. It really did function as one, rather than just like sort of a rat, or a cow going to the slaughter in one of those little chutes, And I think there was a real beauty to that, and I love the animation. And I love the shots of like the way they did theater, the way Ari Aster created like the stage play, there. I mean, it all looks so lovely and awesome.
Like the turning of the trees.
The turning of the seasons of the trees.
That's beautiful.
So
this would be terrific.
Yeah.
That's what I think the middle part. Could it have been shorter? Yeah.
he's having a moment where we see what Beau's life could have been.
Yeah. The
You know,
man
that's-
even he could have been.
I can't say it's like a better life, you know, like he spends his
Yeah.
whole life being separated from his family and
Yeah.
questing for them. You know, it's very kind of Greek tragedy in that regard. And what makes that, because that's the traditional narrative, right? You know, like what we see the rest of the time is not a traditional narrative. What we see in the play is what we consider a 3-act structure, where we set up the situation, we see him go on his quest, and then we have the resolution.
That's true. You know, I felt like the funnest and most involved way to watch that section was to feel like it was all really happening. So when his sons came to him in the space, and he's like, "Oh, you know, my sons," and like he was like hugging them, and everyone was crying. I felt the best way to go along with that as on him was to yes and that and say that's happening right then. You know, not a dream, not made up. Happening. They sure played it hard. I mean, I loved all the young men and just the way the camera was on them, all tight like that. And even though it was dispelled later, I kind of like I tried to have those two ideas at one time, like you know, that's happening, and yet at the same time, it could be the next time, and here comes the guy in with his guns blazing and to ruin everything.
I was just wondering, like, well, what happened instead? What are we supposed to take away? Maybe not take away anything specific at all. He wasn't given a chance to blossom as a person or have his own path. His path was controlled. Is that why he ended up the way he is, the way we see him?
I think so.
Oh man,
it's coming down to being so controlled as to the people in the street, the guy that works at the convenience store across the street, being where he is. Was him getting hit by a car planned?
No.
How could it have been? But
I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Because like I thought someone said earlier, like Mona had that plan for him to be with that family. We should talk about that for a second.
That's a fair question. How can you plan a person hit by a car and have it go the
right?
way?
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's almost kind of the fun of it as well. Is I don't know if you've seen Martin Scorsese's After Hours, like 1982. It's a very similar scenario where a character, Griffin Dunn, plays a character who goes out for the evening and everything bad that can happen does happen.
New York happens to him. Yeah, it's
New York happens to him.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is similar to that in that now, granted, there's no great machination to that movie. It's just kind of like a series of incidents that occur where the worst thing that can happen does happen. But the idea of that all being some puppet master's idea, like there's something kind of great about that as well. Mm-hmm. And in truth, I mean, it is Ari Aster is the puppet master, and he does make it all happen for us. So, you know,
if Mona's control is as wide-reaching as we could suspect it is, then she controls the Amy, Ryan, and Nathan Lane characters. So whether or not she could plan that Joaquin Phoenix would be hit in such a way, okay, now you take them to your house and you do such and such. I mean, they're always following orders. If he wasn't hurt or the car missed him, something else would have happened that she planned.
Well, now that I'm thinking about it, she could have planned someone to steal his keys.
Yeah.
Right.
Someone to steal his keys. And then knowing his only way, or like he had to originally get water. His therapist made it very clear, psychiatrist made it very clear not to take that medication without water.
Right.
And he does. And then he freaks out.
And the water was off in his apartment.
Right. Yeah, exactly. The water was off in his apartment. And then all those people get into his apartment, which then cause, and then he finally gets back in and it's completely trashed. And and there's blood on the walls and shit on the walls and it's disgusting. And he's like, well, water's back on. I can take a bath. And then there's the recluse that's in the apartment, in the building. And then the guy falls on him. And so he freaks out and runs out and gets hit by Amy Ryan.
That's why that guy was hiding up above the bathtub, is so that he would get scared out into the street and get
hit. Because then later she shows him, hey, Channel 78, by the way, you're on film.
Right.
That's how your mother's keeping tabs on you.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yep.
Yeah, if you
It's
look
all
at it,
making sense.
yeah, I mean, if you look at it like that, now I've
I
never.
mean, now I'm like looking at it like that. She planned all of that to test him.
It could be. It could. I mean, I think that's the other thing is that Ari Aster definitely leaves it all open to interpretation.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't think he's saying this is the puzzle box. You have to solve it. I think you can enjoy it for the weird spectacle that it is, but I think he's inviting us to interpret and try and figure things out. And I read an interview where at the very end, after he's basically exploded off the boat and the boat is just sitting there capsized in the water after the trial, the entire audience just quietly leaves.
Yeah.
There's just some murmuring. There's no applause. There's no anything. It's just, they just quietly file out. As I watched it this last time, I imagine that was the reaction to audiences watching it in the theater, is they all just kind of like went, huh. Okay. I guess I'll go home now.
Exactly. That's how I felt. I was like, I need to watch something else real quick. Yeah.
But I feel bad for Ari because, I mean, clearly this was a passion project for him, and the audiences did not embrace it. It feels like it's a movie that people are like, and I can't imagine that was how he wanted it to go down for them. I think he wanted them to enjoy the kind of insanity of it and the layers and the metaphor and things like that. And I feel like people just kind of like went, it's really long and doesn't make a lot of sense.
I found that pretty chilling at the end, though, when they just filed out, And you
hear I know
the Truman Show ending.
Yeah.
It's like us at the movie theater.
I was like, is this the Truman Show right now?
If they applauded or booed, I would have been less chilled than that they just kind of file out.
Right. A part of me just kept waiting for him to wake up. I was like, when?
I'm sure he keeps waiting.
Like, when is he gonna wake up? I don't know if you guys have ever had lucid dreams, and you just keep telling yourself that you're dreaming. I used to get them really bad when I was younger, and I've gotten a few as an adult. But like, you tell yourself, you're dreaming. You can see your room. And you're just like, okay, and I'm going to wake up. And you're like, I can't. And that's when the panic sets in.
There is a moment where Amy Ryan tells him it was just a dream.
Which part was that?
It's when he's in their house, lying in their daughter's bedroom. I remember her saying that, and I'd be like, or is it? Do you just wish it was a dream?
Yeah.
Because he has memories that we we come to learn our memories, but we don't know what they are when we're watching them.
Exactly. Like when he was on the cruise ship.
Oh, and Mona says to him, "You idiot, that wasn't a dream, that's a memory."
Right.
Oh, right. Yeah.
The brother, as punishment because he wouldn't go along, she takes him up to the attic.
Right. That was like a deep-seated memory.
What did they say at the end when it was like, we're putting Beau's guilt on trial?
It was something along the lines of like, you've done these countless acts of selfishness without considering how hard your mother's worked for you. And his lawyer's like, he was trying. His lawyer obviously didn't make a good enough argument. So they were just like, you're done talking. We're just done with you. They were basically putting him on trial for
not being a good son.
For not being, exactly. For not living up to his mother's expectations.
I do have.
She had done so much for him.
I have one thought, and that is like the title Beau is Afraid. It's like, yes, but he's not a coward. He's just, he has a reason to be afraid.
Yeah,
exactly.
Beau is afraid, and rightfully so, because everything goes wrong for him.
The first image of him, this is how he goes home every day. He sprints to his house before everyone else can run into his building. I mean, he's legitimately afraid. Yeah, that's true. That doesn't make him a coward.
But he does sprint.
Maniacs.
The one guy wants to kill him every day.
Or so he thinks.
That's true.
Right. It's weird too because Mona disappears a little bit at the end. We don't really see like her response to Beau essentially blowing up. I mean, did she get what she wanted? You know what I mean? Like she orchestrated all the things that is that ultimately she set up situations where he couldn't win no matter where he turned. So at the end, is that like will she sleep that night thinking, well, I did my best? I mean, because we know that she had a terrible mother, and she said, I didn't want to repeat the mistakes my mother made with me. And so I guess she's probably doing all new horrible stuff. The idea that when there's a terrible system, the people who are perpetrating the system are under that system as well.
When you listen to Patti LuPone's monologue, she makes a very compelling story from her perspective as to how things went down.
Yeah.
And we've been watching it from Beau's perspective, where it's like she's a monster. So, I mean, it's interesting, like that idea of maybe she genuinely thinks she is doing the best she can.
Yeah.
I mean, it is that age-old thing of like, I don't think she perceives herself as a monster. Like, I think she thinks she's the hero of this story.
I mean, essentially, people think that they're right, and whoever is opposing them is wrong. And whether they demonize the other person or not, and that's how we go about our days.
The last song, like it's Both Sides Now in Hereditary over the closing credits, the Judy Collins song, that was stuck in my head for days. And then at the end of Midsommar, it's The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore by the Walker Brothers. And then 2 hours into this movie, at the funeral, there's the song Everything I Own from the band Bread. And I'm kind of like, well, this is where the movie should have ended, because it's 2 hours in, because we don't get any music over the closing credits. We just get that empty silence of them in the stadium and everybody just kind of filing out. But I'm like, Ari's got this nostalgia thing for like, mid to late 60s pop songs. I find him such a fascinating artist. And I know that Beau's Afraid was kind of a financial flop, because I think he spent like, not a big budget, like 36 million, but it only made like, like 15 or 16 million back. So it was a sizable loss. So I don't know that he'll get carte blanche again anytime soon. So maybe he was right to put it all in, because maybe he won't get to make that kind of movie ever again.
It had a Synecdoche, New York vibe about it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like,
very Charlie Kaufman.
Oh, you give me a movie, everything, I'm going to do every single thing.
When he's at his mom's house at the end and he's going down the steps and he's there because he thinks the funeral already happened and everything. There's a photo of him on the winding stairwell that's like current.
Yeah.
So I was like, where was that taken? She has been watching him.
Yep. I think all of Ari Aster's films, and I think this is a sign of a great filmmaker, is that they do deepen on repeat viewings, and you see things that weren't there initially, or you didn't pick up on initially. And I think, seeing Beau is Afraid another time around, I will see more things. I knew watching Midsommar that I would enjoy it more the second time around. Like, I just knew that. I'm like, this is so rich that I know I'm missing things, because I'm just kind of like trying to keep up, trying to see where this is going. So, I think that's why he will remain, success or failure, I think he will remain an intriguing filmmaker for us.
Yeah. He'll make another film. And I wonder if like in the way that movies can have a longevity now, like online, maybe he'll, more money will be made back, or maybe enough, there'll be enough critical plaudits, but I mean, yeah, he'll do something else.
Apparently Ari Aster, I just looked this up. His next film will be a contemporary Western that takes place during the pandemic.
Interesting how all three movies really share different views of grief and loss, and somehow intertwine with each other too, even though they're all so different. So it's just interesting to see how he views those things, and how he has his characters experience those things, because I think it's all relatable for some people. Like the anxiety thing, like in Beau is Afraid, is very relatable for me, and haven't experienced great grief and loss like that, but I have experienced like what it feels like to just really seek out validation from a parent. Yeah, it feels like those three movies do have that in common.
Owais and Mariana both said that, like, particularly in Beau is Afraid, like those conversations really rung true for you, and you could like really hear, like find yourselves in conversations and dealings with a parent, a mother in this instance like that. And that was just really interesting because I knew from watching interviews with Ari Aster that actually he doesn't really bring his own mother into it. But I mean, if you watch the film, something is going on, or something he's thought about something, but you mentioned from your own personal experiences that it rings true in that way. And I just thought that was really interesting and cool to hear.
Yeah. To be fair, my mom is not that extreme.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Just to put that out there.
Just in case Mariana's mom watches all the way to the end.
Are you going to check for cameras in your house?
I love her so much. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you all so much. This is whenever I encounter a really challenging piece of cinema, I'm always excited by the idea that I know I have people to chat about it with. So thank you all for being those people for me this time around. I really appreciate it. And looking forward to having you all back again very, very soon.
Thank you.
Me too.
Until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.